The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched so far that its walls disappeared into artificial mist. 217 species had representatives sitting in the curved rows of seats that rose up like a massive amphitheater. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had bodies made of flesh, others of crystalline structures that hummed with energy. They all turned their attention to the small human woman standing alone at the speaker's platform. Director Sarah Chen stood in a pool of light, her dark suit looking plain compared to the elaborate garments and biological displays of the alien delegates around her. She held a data pad in her hands, but her fingers were trembling slightly. This was humanity's moment to defend itself before the most powerful organization in the known galaxy. "Honored council members," Sarah began, her voice carried by translation technology to every being in the chamber. "Humanity requests that you reconsider this ultimatum. The Kepler Belt asteroids were unclaimed territory when we arrived 17 years ago. We checked the territorial database 3 times. We filed the proper claims. We followed every regulation in the Council's own legal framework." A deep rumbling sound came from the Zavari section. Ambassador Krelva stood up, his massive form covered in thick armored plates that clinked as he moved. The Zavari were one of the founding species of the Council, their civilization spanning 5,000 years of space travel. To them, humans were barely children who had just learned to walk among the stars. "The Kepler Belt has historical significance to the Zavari hegemony," Krelva said, his voice like grinding stone. "Our ancestors passed through that region 4,000 years ago. It is part of our cultural heritage. Your presence there is offensive to us." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "With respect, Ambassador, passing through a region 4,000 years ago does not constitute a territorial claim under current Council law. If it did, the Zavari could claim half the galaxy." A ripple of clicks and whistles went through the chamber. Some species seemed amused. Others looked uncomfortable. The Zavari delegation, however, looked furious. Council Speaker Meredith, a floating jellyfish-like creature suspended in a tank of glowing liquid, raised one translucent tentacle for silence. "Director Chen, the Council has reviewed your claims. While technically filed correctly, the Council finds that special circumstances apply. The Zavari hegemony's historical and cultural connection to the region takes precedence." "That's not law," Sarah said, louder than she intended. "That's just deciding that might makes right." "You will watch your tone," Krelva boomed. "Humanity has been part of this Council for only 70 years. You do not lecture us about what is right." Meredith's tentacles waved in a calming pattern. "The Council has made its decision. Humanity will withdraw from the Kepler Belt within 30 standard days. All mining stations will be surrendered intact to the Zavari hegemony. Earth will pay reparations of 500 billion credits for the cultural offense. These terms are non-negotiable." Sarah's heart sank. 500 billion credits would bankrupt Earth's off-world development programs. Surrendering the mining stations meant losing decades of work and investment. Thousands of human workers would lose their jobs. But more than that, it meant something worse. "And if we refuse?" Sarah asked quietly. "Then the Council will authorize corrective military action," Meredith said. "For your own good, of course. To teach humanity about respecting the established order." The chamber fell silent. Every species knew what corrective military action meant. It meant warships. It meant occupation. It meant a young species being put in its place by forces it could not hope to resist. Sarah looked around the chamber, studying the faces and forms of the alien delegates. Some looked sympathetic but said nothing. Others looked smugly satisfied. A few, she noticed, looked worried, as if they wondered when the Council might turn this same logic against them. "I will take your ultimatum to my government," Sarah said finally, "but I want every species in this chamber to understand something. Humanity did nothing wrong. We followed your laws. We played by your rules, and you're punishing us anyway because we don't have enough guns to make you think twice." "You are dismissed," Krelva said coldly. Sarah walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind her, she could hear the Council moving on to other business as if humanity's entire future was just one item on a very long agenda. The journey back to Earth took 6 days through the faster-than-light transit network. Sarah spent most of that time in her cabin, reviewing the recordings of the Council session and preparing her report. She also spent time crying, though she would never admit that to anyone. When her ship finally approached Earth, Sarah looked out the viewport at the blue and white marble hanging in space. Home. 3 billion people live down there, going about their lives, most of them not even aware that their entire civilization had just been threatened. The meeting with Earth's unified government took place in Geneva, in a secure bunker deep underground. Sarah presented her report to the assembled leaders: President Okonkwo of the African Union, Premier Chen of the Asian Federation, Chancellor Schmidt of Europa, and a dozen others representing every major region of Earth. "They're not going to back down," President Okonkwo said after Sarah finished. "The Zivari want to establish dominance. If we surrender now, we'll spend the next century being pushed around by every species that thinks humans are too weak to matter. But if we fight, we'll lose," Chancellor Schmidt said. "The Zivari alone have more warships than we do. If they bring in council allies, we'll be outnumbered 10-1. Admiral Marcus Webb, head of Earth's Space Defense Force, leaned forward. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. "We'll be outnumbered," he agreed. "But that doesn't mean we can't hurt them. Hurt them badly enough that they regret ever threatening us." "You're talking about war," Premier Chen said. "Real war. Not some border skirmish or police action. War against the entire Galactic Council." "I'm talking about survival," Webb said. "If we surrender now, we're admitting that we're second-class citizens in our own galaxy. Every species out there will know they can take whatever they want from us and we'll just roll over." Sarah watched the leaders debate back and forth. Some wanted to negotiate, to offer compromises, to buy time. Others wanted to fight immediately. A few wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. Finally, President Okonkwo called for a vote. It took 3 hours, but eventually the decision was made. Earth would not surrender. Earth would not pay reparations for crimes it didn't commit. Earth would fight if necessary. "God help us," Chancellor Schmidt whispered. That night, Admiral Webb activated Earth's defense protocols. Ships in orbit were recalled to defensive positions. Mining stations in the Kepler belt received coded instructions. Military factories on Mars and the Moon went to full production. Civilian scientists were quietly recruited into weapons development programs. And on Earth, the news networks began preparing the population for what might come. The broadcasts were careful, not wanting to cause panic. They talked about standing up for Earth's rights. They talked about not being bullied. They talked about human dignity and sovereignty. What they didn't talk about was the fear that ran through every military planning session. The fear that humanity had just made a decision that might end their species. The fear that being right wouldn't matter if you were dead. In the Kepler belt, human miners looked up at the stars and wondered which direction the attack would come from. On Earth, families hugged each other a little tighter. In military academies, young officers studied tactics and strategies, knowing they might soon need them. The 30-day countdown had begun. Humanity had drawn a line in the void of space and dared the galaxy to cross it. Now everyone would find out what happened when you backed humans into a corner and gave them no way out but through. The 30 days passed like sand falling through an hourglass. On the final day, the Zivari hegemony peacekeeping fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler belt. 47 warships, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls gleamed with energy shields that could turn away any known weapon. Their guns could crack a moon in half. Commander Theknor of the Zivari stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the display screens showing the asteroid field ahead. Somewhere in that mess of rocks and ice were the human mining stations. Somewhere out there were the primitive little ships that humans called a navy. "This will be simple," Theknor said to his officers. "Humans have never faced real military force. They will see our fleet and surrender immediately. We will take the stations intact, arrest the workers, and be back home in time for the celebration ceremonies." His tactical officer, a younger Zivari named Srel, studied the sensor readings. "Commander, I'm detecting only 6 human ships. Small frigates. Nothing that could threaten us. 6 ships?" Theknor laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "They couldn't even send a proper defense force. This is an insult." The Zivari fleet moved forward in a perfect formation, a show of military precision meant to intimidate and impress. They approached the largest mining station, a structure of metal and glass that spun slowly in the darkness, its lights still on as if people were still working inside. Theknor opened a communication channel. "Attention, human forces. This is Commander Theknor of the Zivari hegemony. Under the authority of the Galactic Council, I am here to take possession of these facilities. Surrender immediately and you will not be harmed. Resist and you will be destroyed. You have 60 seconds to respond. The seconds ticked by. 30, 40, 50. The human frigates maintained their position, not moving forward or retreating, not responding. 55 seconds, Shrell said. 58, 59, 60. The communication channel crackled to life. A human voice, male, calm, speaking in heavily accented Galactic standard. No, just one word. Just a simple refusal. Theknor felt his armor plates heat with anger. You dare refuse? You are outnumbered and outgunned. I give you one more chance. Surrender now. No, the human voice said again. Then you will die, Theknor said. He cut the channel and turned to his weapons officer. Destroy the nearest frigate. Make it quick. Show them we are serious. The flagship's main gun charged with a sound like thunder. Energy built up in the weapon. Enough power to vaporize a small mountain. The gun fired. A beam of coherent light that crossed the distance to the human frigate in a fraction of a second. The beam hit, but the frigate was already moving, rolling away at an angle that should have been impossible for a ship that size. The beam still caught it, tearing through the rear section, but the frigate kept moving, kept fighting, and then the frigate fired back. Human weapons were different from Zavari guns. They didn't use energy beams. They used physical projectiles, chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. The Zavari shields could stop them, but it took more power than Theknor expected. All ships engage, Theknor ordered. Crush them. The battle began in earnest. The Zavari fleet, with all its power and numbers, pressed forward. The 6 human frigates scattered like insects, each one moving in wild, unpredictable patterns. They didn't fight like any military force Theknor had ever seen. They fought like animals, like cornered beasts that knew they were going to die but were determined to take someone with them. One human frigate, its engines damaged and bleeding atmosphere, turned straight toward a Zavari cruiser. The cruiser's captain laughed at the apparent suicide run and prepared to swat the tiny ship from space. But the frigate didn't fire weapons. It just kept coming, accelerating, using its last power to go faster and faster. It's going to ram us, the cruiser captain realized too late. The frigate hit the cruiser at full speed. The explosion was massive, a ball of fire that bloomed in the darkness. When it cleared, the cruiser was split in half, its crew of 300 dead in an instant. The frigate was gone, vaporized by the impact. They're insane, Shrell whispered, watching the display. But the humans weren't done. Another frigate, surrounded by 3 Zavari destroyers, suddenly ejected its cargo pods. The Zavari thought it was jettisoning supplies to run faster, but the pods weren't full of supplies. They were full of explosives, jury-rigged bombs that detonated all at once, creating a chain reaction that caught 2 of the destroyers in the blast. The battle raged for 3 hours. The humans fought with a desperation that terrified the Zavari crews. They used every trick, every tactic, every weapon they had. When their guns ran out of ammunition, they used their ships as missiles. When their shields failed, they kept fighting anyway. One by one, the human frigates died. But they didn't die quietly. When the last human ship exploded, taking a Zavari heavy cruiser with it, Theknor looked at the casualty reports and felt his confidence drain away. 12 Zavari ships destroyed. 19 damaged so badly they would need months in dock for repairs. Over 3,000 Zavari warriors dead, and they hadn't even reached the mining stations yet. Commander, we should secure the facilities, Shrell said quietly. Theknor nodded and gave the order. Teams of Zavari soldiers entered the mining stations in full battle armor, expecting to find terrified human workers hiding in the darkness. But the stations were empty. Every human was gone, evacuated days ago, and everywhere the Zavari soldiers looked, they found bombs. The first station exploded 20 minutes after the Zavari teams entered. The blast was big enough to be seen from the flagship's bridge. Then the second station blew. Then the third. In less than an hour, all 12 mining stations were reduced to debris. The humans had destroyed everything. Equipment worth billions of credits gone. Refined materials gone. Years of work erased. Rather than let the Zavari have it, the humans had burned it all. Theknor stood on his damaged bridge and looked at the disaster around him. This was supposed to be a simple peacekeeping mission. A show of force against primitives who didn't know their place. Instead, it had turned into a bloodbath. Get me a channel to the hegemony, Theknor said. They need to know what happened here. The report that reached the Galactic Council 3 days later caused chaos. The Zavari, humiliated, demanded a full military response. Other species, shocked by the human tactics, called for caution. Some species, privately, began to wonder if threatening humanity had been a terrible mistake. In the council chambers, Ambassador Krelva slammed his fist on his podium. These humans are barbarians. They fight without honor. They use suicide tactics. They destroyed the very things we came to claim. Council Speaker Meredith's tentacles waved in agitation. The council authorized a peacekeeping force, not a war. What the Zavari are describing sounds like a war. Then we will give them a war, Krelva roared. We will assemble a proper fleet. 200 ships. 300, however many it takes. We will go to Earth itself and end this defiance once and for all. The vote took 6 hours, but eventually the council agreed. A coalition fleet would be assembled from multiple species. It would take 3 months to organize, but when it was ready, it would be the largest military force assembled in 2 centuries. They would go to Earth's home system and end the human problem permanently. On Earth, news of the Battle of the Kepler Belt spread through the networks like wildfire. People gathered in the streets, some celebrating the victory, others mourning the crews who died. The government declared the fallen frigate crews to be heroes, the first casualties in humanity's fight for respect. Admiral Webb addressed the planet from a broadcast studio. Today, 6 human ships faced 47 alien warships and made them bleed. Today, we proved that humanity will not surrender. Today, we showed the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth. But this was just the beginning. The Council is coming, and when they arrive, they're bringing an army. So we have 3 months. 3 months to prepare. 3 months to get ready for the biggest fight humanity has ever faced. He paused, looking directly into the camera, his old eyes hard as steel. 3 months to teach the galaxy why you don't threaten humans unless you're ready to pay the price. Across Earth, in military bases and civilian homes, in factories and laboratories, humans heard the message and understood. The real war was coming. And this time, humanity wouldn't just fight to defend a few mining stations. They would fight for their very survival. In the darkness between stars, the galaxy held its breath and waited to see what would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable species. The Council had numbers and technology on their side. But humanity had something the Council had forgotten existed: the willingness to do absolutely anything to survive. The Coalition fleet was being assembled at Anchor Station, a massive military facility in neutral space. 237 warships from 19 different species, all gathering in one place. It was meant to be an impressive display of Council unity and power. It was meant to make Earth surrender without a fight, but Earth wasn't surrendering, and Earth wasn't waiting. The first attack happened 16 days after the Battle of the Kepler Belt. A Kelthori supply convoy was moving through the Andros system, carrying fuel and ammunition to the growing Coalition fleet. The convoy consisted of 5 transport ships protected by 3 warships. It should have been safe. The transport ships never reached Anchor Station. The official report said that the convoy suffered a catastrophic engine failure that caused a chain reaction. But the Kelthori investigators found something strange in the wreckage. They found traces of a biological agent, something that ate through the organic compounds the Kelthori used in their ship hulls, something that spread fast and dissolved structural supports until the ships tore themselves apart. Someone had sabotaged the convoy, and the Council had a good idea who. 3 days later, Admiral Vren of the Vrin Collective was preparing for bed in his private quarters on his flagship. The Vrin were a cybernetic species, their brains connected directly to computer networks through neural implants. Admiral Vren had served for 40 years, fighting in 6 different conflicts. He was a strategic genius, chosen to coordinate the Coalition fleet's attack patterns. His implant activated at 23:47 station time, but he hadn't activated it. Someone else had. Someone who broke through 3 layers of security and took control of his neural interface. Someone who sent a massive surge of electricity through his brain. Admiral Vren died instantly. The security investigation found no physical intruders, no bombs, no conventional weapons. Just a hack, executed by someone who understood Vrin technology better than the Vrin themselves. Humanity had killed a Coalition admiral from halfway across the galaxy. The attacks continued. Each one different, each one targeting a weakness. A Zavari staging base lost power when someone poisoned the fuel supply with a contaminant that caused the reactor to shut down. A Thex communications relay was destroyed when someone managed to overload it remotely, frying the equipment and killing the operators. A squadron of Marin fighters exploded on the launch pad when saboteurs managed to replace the safety regulators with faulty ones. Earth's Special Operations Forces were moving through Council space like ghosts, hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach. They traveled on civilian ships, hiding among the regular traffic that moved through the galaxy. They studied their targets for days or weeks, learning patrol patterns, finding vulnerabilities, planning their strikes. Captain Lisa Rodriguez led one such team. She was 32 years old, born on Mars, trained in Earth's most elite military units. Her team consisted of 6 people, all experts in infiltration, demolition, and combat. They had been operating behind enemy lines for 3 weeks. Their current target was a fuel depot on Kelvin Prime, a Zivari colony world. The depot supplied fuel to military ships, making it a legitimate target under any rules of war. But the Zivari didn't think anyone would dare attack a facility on one of their homeworlds. They were wrong. Rodriguez and her team approached the depot dressed as civilian maintenance workers, using forged identification cards that they'd stolen from an actual maintenance company. The Zivari guards barely looked at them. Why would anyone attack here so deep in Zivari territory? The team split up once inside. 2 people went to the control room. 2 went to the storage tanks. Rodriguez and her demolitions expert, a woman named Chen, went to the main pumping station. Charges set, Chen whispered into her communicator. Ready on your mark. Rodriguez looked at her watch. They had rehearsed this 100 times. Timing was everything. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The explosions were carefully placed to maximize damage while minimizing civilian casualties. The fuel depot went up in a fireball that could be seen from orbit. Millions of liters of military-grade fuel burned, sending black smoke into the sky. The depot would be out of commission for months. Rodriguez and her team were already gone, disappearing into the chaos, making their way to the extraction point where a disguised civilian ship was waiting. By the time the Zivari authorities figured out what happened, the humans were already in faster-than-light travel, heading to their next target. The Galactic Council had never seen warfare like this. They were used to formal battles between fleets, fought according to established conventions. Civilians were off limits. Infrastructure was respected. Wars were supposed to be clean, organized, honorable. Humans ignored all of it. They hit supply lines, command centers, fuel depots, communications relays. They used computer viruses, biological agents, conventional explosives, and anything else that worked. They didn't care about fighting fair. They cared about winning. Ambassador Krelva stood before the council, his armor plates vibrating with rage. These humans are terrorists. They attack without warning. They use weapons that are banned by council conventions. They must be stopped. How do you stop an enemy you can't find? Asked the representative from the Thex Communion. Our intelligence services have been trying to track these human teams for weeks. They appear, strike, and vanish. It's like fighting shadows. Council Speaker Meredith looked tired, her normally bright glow dimmed. The Coalition fleet will launch in 60 days. Once we reach Earth, this will all be over. But privately, many council members were beginning to worry. The casualty reports kept coming in. Nothing huge, nothing that threatened the council's overall military power, but enough to add up. 3,000 dead here, 5,000 wounded there, equipment destroyed, bases damaged, officers assassinated, and the psychological impact was worse. Coalition soldiers, species that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years, were beginning to feel fear. They looked over their shoulders. They jumped at shadows. They started to wonder if the next ship they boarded might explode, if the next meal might be poisoned, if the next computer terminal might be hacked. Humans were in their heads. On Earth, the population watched the reports with grim satisfaction. The government didn't officially acknowledge the special operations teams, maintaining plausible deniability. But everyone knew. Everyone understood what was happening. Humanity was fighting back the only way it could. Admiral Webb coordinated the operations from a command center deep under the Rocky Mountains. He had a map of the galaxy spread across multiple screens, with red dots marking every coalition target. Each successful operation got a green checkmark. The map was filling up with green. How are our people holding up? Webb asked his operations officer. Tired, but still operational. We've lost 2 teams so far. One on Vryn territory, one near Anchor Station. But the others are still active, Webb nodded. 2 teams lost meant 12 people dead. 12 families who would receive notifications. 12 more names on the memorial wall. But those 12 had probably saved thousands by disrupting Coalition operations. Keep them moving, Webb said. Don't let the Coalition figure out our patterns. Hit targets they think are safe. Make them afraid everywhere. In the Galactic Council's intelligence headquarters, a team of analysts studied the human attacks, trying to find patterns, trying to predict where humans would strike next. But humans were unpredictable. They attacked military targets and infrastructure, but never civilians. They used advanced technology but also simple, crude methods. They followed some rules of war but ignored others. One analyst, a Thex named Quilven, made a disturbing observation. They're adapting to each species. Look at this. They used biological weapons against the Kelthori, who use organic technology. They used cyber attacks against the Vryn, who rely on neural implants. They used conventional explosives against the Zavari, who have strong shields but weak armor joints. They're studying us, learning our weaknesses, exploiting them. That's impossible, his superior said. They've only been in space for a century. They don't have that kind of intelligence data. Then explain the pattern, Quilven said, pointing at his analysis. Every attack is precisely targeted at a specific weakness. They're not just fighting. They're hunting. The report reached the Council, and for the first time some members began to truly understand what they were facing. Humans weren't just primitives with lucky tactics. They were intelligent, adaptive, and utterly ruthless when threatened. They had taken one look at the galaxy's most powerful military alliance and found 1,000 ways to hurt it. As the Coalition fleet prepared for its final launch toward Earth, a coded message spread through human communication networks. It was short, just a few words, but every human who read it understood what it meant. The enemy is coming. Let them come. We'll be ready. Earth had spent 3 months turning its home system into a fortress. Weapons platforms orbited every planet. Mines drifted in asteroid fields. Ships hid in the shadow of moons. Earth wasn't planning to meet the Coalition fleet in open battle. Earth was planning to make the Coalition bleed for every meter of space they took. The countdown to the Battle of Sol had begun. Humanity had used every trick, every tactic, every weapon at its disposal to weaken the enemy. Now came the real test. Now came the moment when the Coalition fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of metallic predators. 237 warships, representing the combined military might of 19 species. Their sensors immediately began scanning for targets, expecting to find a small defensive force and a terrified human population ready to beg for mercy. High Admiral Krelva, who had demanded personal command of the operation, stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the display screens. His rage at the human attacks over the past months had only grown stronger. Now he would have his revenge. Send them the final terms, Krelva ordered. Tell them they have one chance to surrender. After that, we will take Earth by force. The communication channel opened. Admiral Marcus Webb's face appeared on the screen, transmitted from Earth's Defense Command Center. He was an old human by their standards, his hair gray, his face lined, but his eyes were hard as diamonds. Hi, Admiral, Webb said calmly. I've received your transmission. Let me give you our answer. Krelva waited, expecting to hear terms of surrender, pleas for mercy, desperate negotiations. Webb smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Come and take it, the channel went dead. Krelva roared with fury, his armor plates clanking together. All ships, advance! We will crush them. The Coalition fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of military power that no known force could stop. They passed the orbit of Pluto, then Neptune. Their sensors showed 60 human warships scattered throughout the system, outnumbered almost 4-1. This will be over quickly, Krelva said to his officers. Humans are brave, but bravery means nothing against superior numbers. The first surprise came when the Coalition fleet reached the asteroid belt. Sensors detected something strange. Large objects moving among the asteroids, accelerating toward the fleet at impossible speeds. By the time the Coalition commanders realized they were kinetic missiles, massive chunks of rock and metal accelerated to tremendous velocity. It was too late to fully evade. The missiles hit like the hammer of an angry god. Shields stopped some, point defense guns destroyed others, but several got through. slamming into coalition ships with the force of nuclear weapons. 3 ships were destroyed outright. 5 more were crippled, their hulls torn open, atmosphere venting into space. Return fire, Krelva ordered. But there was nothing to fire at. The missiles had come from platforms hidden among millions of asteroids. Finding them would take hours they didn't have. The fleet pressed on, more cautious now. As they approached Mars, the human frigates finally engaged, but not in the way the coalition expected. The human ships didn't form battle lines or try to fight conventionally. Instead, they scattered in all directions, each one operating independently, using hit-and-run tactics. A human destroyer would appear from behind Mars, fire a volley of missiles, then disappear back into the planet's shadow before the coalition ships could respond. Human fighters, small craft that looked too fragile to be military vessels, would swarm a coalition cruiser, attacking from all directions at once, then vanish before they could be caught. "They're like insects," complained a Vryn captain over the communication channel. "Every time we swat at them, they're already gone." But the insects had stings. Human weapons were different from what the coalition used. Instead of energy beams that shields could deflect easily, humans used physical projectiles, railgun rounds, missiles with adaptive guidance systems, and something new that the coalition had never seen before. A human cruiser fired what looked like a missile at a Kelthori battleship. The Kelthori captain laughed and activated his ship's point defense, confident the missile would be destroyed. The point defense guns fired, hit the missile, and then something strange happened. The missile split apart into 100 smaller projectiles, each one moving independently. The point defense couldn't track them all. 70 of the small projectiles hit the Kelthori battleship, tearing through its organic hull plating like bullets through flesh. The battleship died, taking its crew of 2,000 with it. What in the void was that? Someone shouted over the command channel. "It's called a cluster munition." Admiral Webb's voice came over an open broadcast. "Welcome to human warfare." The coalition fleet reached Earth's orbit after 6 hours of fighting. They had lost 23 ships with 31 more damaged. The humans had lost 18 ships. The numbers still favored the coalition. But the battle had been far more costly than anyone expected. And then the humans revealed their next surprise. The coalition sensors detected multiple large structures in Earth's orbit. At first, the commanders thought they were space stations or defensive platforms. Easy targets. Multiple coalition ships moved to destroy them. The structures exploded when the coalition ships came close, but not from being hit. They detonated deliberately, massive bombs that had been disguised as stations. The explosions caught dozens of coalition ships in their blast radius. The antimatter charges turned space into a sea of fire. 16 more coalition ships died in those explosions. The others pulled back, suddenly afraid of every structure they could see. "They're using suicide tactics again," Krelva's tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "They're willing to destroy their own infrastructure to hurt us." Krelva was beginning to understand that this battle would not be the easy victory he had imagined. But he still had over 170 ships. The humans had less than 40 left. Numbers would still prevail. "All ships prepare for final assault," Krelva ordered. "We will destroy every human ship, then bombard Earth until they surrender." But before the order could be executed, something happened that changed everything. Every screen on every coalition ship suddenly activated with the same image. Admiral Webb, broadcasting on all frequencies using a powerful transmitter that couldn't be jammed. "Attention coalition forces," Webb said. "I need to show you something." The image changed to show a star map. Red dots appeared, dozens of them scattered across the galaxy. Each dot had a label: Zavari Prime, Kelthori Homeworld, Vryn Core, the home planets of every species involved in the coalition fleet. "For the past 3 months," Webb continued, "while your attention was on Earth, we've been busy. Those red dots you see are weapons platforms, relativistic kinetic missiles. Each one is loaded with a projectile weighing several tons, accelerated to 90% of light speed. Each one is aimed at a civilian population center on your homeworlds." Silence fell across the coalition fleet. Every commander, every crew member, everyone who had family back home, felt their blood turn to ice. "These weapons are on a dead man's switch," Webb said. "If Earth falls, if our command structure is destroyed, if we are eliminated, the switches activate. And your homeworlds die, not military targets, not soldiers. Your civilians, your children, your families, Everyone. You're bluffing, Krelva said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Webb asked. You've seen what we're willing to do. You've seen us use suicide tactics. Destroy our own property, ignore every convention of civilized warfare. Do you really think we're bluffing about this? The truth was they weren't. Earth had spent its resources, its time, and its ingenuity building the ultimate deterrent. If humanity was going to die, they would take the galaxy with them. The Coalition command channel exploded with chatter. Captains demanding orders. Governments back home demanding information. Some ships began moving away from Earth on their own, their crews refusing to risk their homeworlds. Krelva stood on his bridge, armor plates cold with dread. He had come here to punish humans for their defiance. He had come here to teach them their place. Instead, he had walked into a trap that threatened his entire species. High Admiral, his communications officer said quietly. We're receiving transmission from the Zavari hegemony government. They're ordering us to stand down. Similar messages came from the other Coalition species. Their governments, faced with the choice between punishing Earth and protecting their own populations, chose survival. The Battle of Sol was over. Not because humanity won in conventional terms. They were still outnumbered, still outgunned, but they had played a card that the Council never expected primitives to have. The willingness to embrace mutually assured destruction. Krelva's hands shook as he gave the order. All ships. Withdraw from Earth space. Cease fire. The Coalition fleet began to retreat, pulling back from Earth's orbit, leaving their dead behind. The human ships did not pursue. They had won, but it was a victory built on the threat of ultimate horror. On Earth, people watched the alien fleet withdraw and cheered. They didn't know about the planet-killer weapons, didn't understand that humanity had just threatened to commit genocide on a galactic scale. They just knew that the enemy was leaving and Earth had survived. In his command center, Admiral Webb sat down heavily in his chair. He felt no joy in this victory. He had saved Earth, but he had done it by threatening to kill billions of innocent civilians on other worlds. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Get me a secure channel to the Council, Webb said quietly. Tell them we need to talk. Tell them humanity is ready. 2 weeks after the Battle of Sol, a delegation arrived at Earth. Not a military fleet this time, but diplomatic vessels flying white flags of truce. The Galactic Council wanted to talk. They met at a neutral space station in orbit around Mars. Director Sarah Chen led the human delegation, the same woman who had stood before the Council months ago and been dismissed as insignificant. Now she walked into the conference room with her head held high, flanked by Admiral Webb and 3 other officials. The Council's delegation looked different than before. There was no arrogance now, no casual dismissal. Ambassador Krelva was there, but he stood in the back, not at the front. Council Speaker Meredith floated in her tank, her tentacles moving in agitated patterns. Director Chen, Meredith began, the Council has asked me to convey our willingness to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this conflict. A peaceful resolution, Sarah repeated. Is that what you call it when you bring a fleet to exterminate us? And we're forced to threaten mutual destruction just to survive? A Thex representative, a being of crystalline structures that hummed with internal light, spoke up. We acknowledge that perhaps the Council was hasty in its actions. The situation was mishandled. Mishandled? Admiral Webb laughed, a harsh sound. You tried to bully us into giving up our legal territory. When we refused, you sent an army to destroy us. You call that mishandled? We are here to make peace, Meredith said firmly. The Council is prepared to offer significant concessions. We will recognize all human territorial claims. We will pay reparations for the ships lost in battle. We will formally invite humanity to join the Council as a full member species, with all rights and privileges. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. This was more than they had expected. The Council was essentially surrendering to their demands, but Sarah knew that accepting too quickly would be a mistake. Those terms are acceptable as a starting point, Sarah said carefully. But humanity has additional requirements before we agree to peace. The Council delegates shifted uncomfortably. They had expected humans to jump at the offer. Instead, humans were making demands. What requirements? Meredith asked. Sarah pulled out a datapad and began reading. First, the Council's system of founding species with special voting privileges is abolished. All Council members, regardless of how long they've been members, have equal votes. That's impossible, Krelva burst out. The founding species created the council. We have earned our status. You've abused your status, Sarah shot back. You used it to steal from us. How many other species have you pushed around using the same tactics? How many times have you claimed historical rights to take what you wanted? Several of the delegates looked uncomfortable. Sarah had hit a nerve. Second, Sarah continued, the council must establish clear rules against preemptive aggression. Member species cannot be threatened with military action for refusing unreasonable demands. There must be actual mediation, actual justice, not just the strong bullying the weak. The council has always maintained peace, Meredith protested weakly. You've maintained control, Webb corrected. There's a difference. You've kept species in line through fear and intimidation. That ends now. And third, Sarah said, humanity wants a voice in council military doctrine and strategic planning. Our tactics, our innovations, our experience will be integrated into council forces. In return, we'll help defend council space and member worlds. You want us to learn to fight like you, the Thex representative said. Like barbarians? No, Webb said quietly. We want you to learn to fight like survivors. Because someday something worse than us might come from beyond council space. And when that happens, you'll wish you knew how to fight dirty. The negotiations took 3 days. The council delegates argued, complained, tried to water down the human demands. But they always came back to one simple fact. Humanity still had those planet-killer weapons aimed at their homeworlds. The dead man switches were still active. Finally, a treaty was drafted. Earth would join the Galactic Council as a full member. Human territorial claims would be recognized and protected. The founding species system would be gradually phased out over 10 years. New procedures for conflict resolution would be established. And, most significantly, a new council principle would be adopted: the right of all species to defend themselves by any means necessary when faced with extinction. The treaty was signed on Earth, in the same Geneva building where humanity's leaders had decided to fight rather than surrender. Representatives from every council species attended, watching as Sarah Chen and Council Speaker Meredith put their marks on the document. This is a new beginning for the galaxy, Meredith said in her speech. A beginning built on respect and equality. What she didn't say but everyone understood was that it was a beginning built on fear. Fear of what humanity would do if threatened again. 5 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. Humanity, with its fresh perspective and aggressive diplomacy, became an unexpected force for reform on the Council. They championed smaller species that had been marginalized. They pushed for transparency in Council decisions. They demanded accountability when powerful species tried to abuse their influence, and other species listened. Because everyone remembered what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The planet-killer weapons became known as the Damocles system, named after an ancient human story about a sword hanging by a thread. They remained in place, an unspoken threat that kept the peace. Some species called it terrorism. Others called it necessary deterrence. Humanity called it insurance. Earth itself changed too. The war had unified the planet in ways that centuries of peace never had. Old rivalries between regions faded as everyone recognized they were humans first, nationals second. The military expanded, with thousands of young people volunteering to defend Earth and its growing territories. And humanity's reputation spread through the galaxy. They were the species that couldn't be bullied. The species that would rather burn down everything than accept subjugation. Other species began approaching Earth quietly, asking for help with their own problems, knowing that humans would stand up to council power in ways they couldn't. Sarah Chen, now promoted to Earth's permanent council ambassador, found herself in an interesting position. Species that had once looked down on humans now sought her support. Founding members that had once sneered at Earth's primitive status now treated her with careful respect. She was standing in the council chambers one day, watching a debate about trade regulations, when a message came through her personal communicator. A small species called the Renduri, who had only joined the council 20 years ago, were being pressured by a larger species to surrender mining rights to an asteroid field they had legally claimed. It was the same situation Earth had faced, the strong trying to steal from the weak, using council authority as a shield. Sarah looked across the chamber at Krelva, who was watching the Rendari representative plead his case with obvious disinterest. Their eyes met. The Zeveri ambassador's expression was hard to read through his armored face, but Sarah thought she saw understanding there, perhaps even a hint of shame. The Rendari have legal rights to those asteroids, Sarah spoke up, her voice carrying through the chamber. Earth supports their claim and opposes any attempt to pressure them into surrendering what is legally theirs. Several other species quickly added their support. The larger species trying to pressure the Rendari backed down, not wanting to start a fight they might lose. The Rendari representative looked at Sarah with gratitude shining in his multiple eyes. After the session, Sarah walked through the station corridors toward her ship. Admiral Webb was waiting for her, visiting from Earth for a military conference. Another species saved from bullying, Webb said with a slight smile. You're making us the galaxy's protectors. Someone has to be, Sarah replied. The Council had centuries to establish real justice. They chose convenience over fairness. Now they're learning the price of that choice. Do you ever regret it? Webb asked. The way we won? The threats we made? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Every day, she finally said. I think about those weapons we aimed at civilian populations. I think about how close we came to using them. I think about the 3,000 human soldiers who died, and the 14,000 coalition personnel we killed. War is never glorious, Marcus. We just happened to be good at it. But you'd do it again, Webb said. It wasn't a question. In a heartbeat, Sarah confirmed, because the alternative was watching humanity become a servant species, watching Earth get conquered and occupied, watching our culture get erased. Sometimes the only choice is between terrible options and worse ones, Webb nodded. They walked in silence for a while. Two humans who had helped save their species but who would carry the weight of that salvation for the rest of their lives. Elsewhere in the galaxy, in a classroom on a Thex colony world, a teacher was giving a lesson on recent galactic history. Young Thex students, their crystalline bodies still small and dim, listened to the story of how a primitive species had stood up to the entire council and won. What can we learn from this? The teacher asked. One student raised a limb. That humans are dangerous? Thank you for watching and comment for next part.